So I don't think I can do any better than read a couple of paragraphs that John wrote in the introduction. Actually, Mary Jo Buell and I edited it, and there's about 20 essays with a lot of photographs, probably by people you know or of people you know, and some comic strips, because retiring, what I do now is produce progressive left-wing comic books for young people to engage with. It's a second childhood. A century ago, I'm quoting him, the robber elites heard the promise of democracy as a threat, but the people of Wisconsin heard it as a call to action. In response, they forged a progressive populist movement that would influence and inspire Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal and the great social and economic progress of the 20th century. The old fight is on again, as a new generation of robber baron masters and their servant legislators seeks to undo not just the regulatory and programmatic legacy of the New Deal, but of all 20th century progress. They played their hand first in Wisconsin, and they learned the hard way that the people are not so disengaged or so disenchanted that they will easily surrender their rights. When they took to the streets to defend those rights, Wisconsinites gave what Walt Whitman described as the sign of democracy, and they passed it on to America. Once more, the people are on the march. In Madison, in Lansing, in Columbus, in Augusta, in Tallahassee, and in Washington. And if the challenges they face today seem every bit as daunting as they did in La Folle's time, so does their responsibility. What started in Wisconsin cannot end in Wisconsin. Just as the promise that was made by La Folle a century ago in Wisconsin was passed on to the rest of the United States, so the movement that began in Madison on that cold February, March days must spread. The old fight has been joined by a new generation that shares Jefferson's enlightened view regarding the palpable truth of the American experiment. That the mass of mankind was not born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them legitimately by the grace of God. And by the grace of God, this is wonderfully written history. Thank you. John.
I think at that point I'll just say thank you and leave. But I would be very remiss if I didn't at least stick around long enough to say that Paul Buell is one of the great historians of not just the left, but of the American experience, and of a vision of America that is deeply rooted not just in progressive politics today, but in the progressive politics that began with our mutual hero, Tom Paine, and that is carried forward across the centuries. And I really do encourage you, of course, to buy Paul's book as well, but also to give one more round of applause to my friend, my hero, Paul Buell. One of the complicated things about the Wisconsin struggle is that people from other places don't always understand how Wisconsinites do things. I had a friend from New Jersey. The governor, our Governor Walker, would refer to her as an out-of-state union boss. She was actually somebody who came out on her own dime, drove out because she wanted to see what was happening last February and March in Wisconsin, as hundreds of thousands of people came out, not just in Madison, but in Racine and Kenosha and Milwaukee and in Platteville and in Washburn and in towns across the state to rise up in favor not merely of labor rights, but of democracy itself. She wanted to see that, so she was outside the Capitol here in Madison, and it was a day that the governor and his aides had locked the protesters out. They had closed the Capitol, and so there were thousands of people outside chanting, "Let us in, let us in," and they were saying something else, and this woman from New Jersey, a tough labor boss from the East Coast, she didn't understand the last word that was being said. Let us in, it's something else. Let us in, it's something else. And so finally she turned to someone and she said, "What are they saying?" And the person next to her, a good Wisconsin, looked a little surprised, said, "Say, let us in, please." resilience. And so our politeness demands that we do recognize a few of the folks who joined us for this discussion of this new book. And I want to say how very, very honored I am to be in the presence today of people who form the storyline of the book, people who are in every page of this book. And one of them is a Dane County supervisor who, as this struggle was rising up, got the Dane County Board, this is the county around Madison, to vote in favor of labor rights, to say that this county, this place stands on the side of labor unions and economic and social justice. And amazingly enough, she has decided that Dane County's not enough. Now she's running for the legislature to go up to the Capitol and set them straight. Our friend Melissa Sargent, who's recognize, and I promise, I get in trouble for this. I promise I won't go down each row person by person. But I do want to note that, that the sheriff of Dane County, who was in charge of a lot of the security at the Capitol, and established a different vision. We've seen in recent months many of the debates about Occupy Wall Street and the way that policing has responded to public protest and to dissent in this country, and sometimes the very draconian measures that police forces have gone to in some cities. In Madison, that did not happen. In Wisconsin, that did not happen because we had police officers and we had policing leaders who believed that their responsibility was not merely to protect public safety, of course that was essential, but also to protect the Constitution and the public's right to dissent. And the sheriff of Dane County, when he was asked to reject that premise, to reject that notion, and to take actions that he thought were inappropriate as regards to defending the right to dissent and protecting the right of people to express their free speech views, said, in one of the great quotes of the Wisconsin struggle, that my deputies are not a palace guard. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheriff Nichols. And finally, I again, promising not to go row by row, but I do want to note that in the early stages of the struggle in Wisconsin, which we'll talk about a good deal today, there was a great question about how it would gel, how it would take form. And one of the most profound moments was when the teachers in the Madison public schools chose, not out of any disregard for their students or the parents and the community, they chose to step up and say that we need to go to our Capitol. We need to take a day off from school and go to the Capitol and lobby on behalf of public workers, public school teachers, public education, and public services, because our elected leaders have forgotten their commitments in this regard. And the longtime executive director of Madison Teachers Incorporated, and the person who was really one of the great leaders and central players in this struggle, is with us today. He is John Matthews from MTI. The day that the teachers did walk out, I was driving to the state capitol here in Madison, and folks who know Madison know that it is not the most crowded town. It's not. There's a little space here. You can get across town pretty quick. And at 10 in the morning, you can drive up East Washington Avenue to the Capitol with no trouble at all. It's never a problem. And yet this morning, as I was driving up, this is about a year ago, almost a year ago today, I'm driving to the Capitol, and I was encountering traffic difficulty. There were cars in front of me, and things were moving slowly. And I thought to myself, what could be amiss? And I looked ahead, I saw some police lights flashing, and I thought, my goodness, what has happened in my peaceful